In humans, there are few things that are considered as special or sacred as childbirth, and certain people out there refer to it as a straight-up miracle, with even the mere mention of it making some shed a tear, tears of happiness. And yet, if you could bring up birth to animals, perhaps you'd find that many of them would shed a few drops as well. But some of them wouldn't be crying because it made them sentimental, but rather, they'd be crying over the pure horror of it. Because just like in many aspects of life, nature has taken it upon herself to create some nightmarish ways in which animals have children. And in some of the cases, the details are so grim that you'd think that Stephen King himself had come up with these methods, making it so that you can't help but feel sorry for the afflicted creature. Even if, normally, might be one that you'd avoid at all costs. Which in this case I'm referring to a creepy crawly, a spider, to be specific. And for those with arachnophobia, you may be thinking, no matter what, I'd never feel sorry for a spider. But let me tell you, that's because you never heard of the velvet spider. These arachnids aren't just different because some of them can look a bit like Spider-Man, it's also because they hold a secret too. Being nearly restricted to just the old world, this group of spiders have evolved a one-of-a-kind way of giving birth that is only seen in this group. And honestly, that's for the best. To be more transparent, it's not really something that happens during birth, which is disturbing, but rather what happens immediately after, with the mothers taking parental sacrifice to a whole new level. Each one can give birth to hundreds of babies, but unlike many other species of spiders, they will only give birth a single time, because in this spider, having kids is a literal death sentence. Immediately after the babies are birthed, the mom will undergo an intense self-destruction process, an unimaginably excruciating one at that, as her insides will start to break down and liquefy. Yeah, not pleasant. And this may seem very pointless and alarming, but there is a strategy at play here. She is cooking up some delicious spider soup, with the main ingredient being herself. And as it reaches that oh-so-perfect culinary perfection, she will then proceed to yak all this ooey-gooey goodness up so her children can then scarf it down, giving mom's home-cooked meals a whole new meaning. And she won't just do this once, but multiple times for as long as she can, repeating a process of liquefying her inside, vomiting it up, giving it to the kids, and so on, with her only stopping when her melted organs reach that fatal point, and she has become essentially an empty husk, which upon she will then probably die. And you'd think that after having melted herself in order to feed her children, that the kids would show some appreciation. But no, it's straight up disrespect. As after sensing the mother is dead and she has no more spider soup to offer, the children will then proceed to eat her corpse as well. How lovely. And this definitely makes me think we should have at least one day set aside to celebrate these spider moms, because that is just insane. But not all horrifying births are such an ordeal for the parents. Sometimes it's the kid who gets the short end of the stick. Just ask Darwin's frog. This is a species of small frog, which as its name suggests, was discovered by Charles Darwin and is only found in Chile, where it remains an elusive creature and has evolved to take a page straight out of Greek mythology when it comes to giving birth. Now, I'm sure you all have heard the story of the mad titan Kronos. Fearing a prophecy of being overthrown by his children, he began swallowing his offspring in hopes of quelling it. But eventually, after some betrayal and a fight with his only non-swallowed child, Zeus, the offspring came rushing out of his mouth, where the now regurgitated Titan's children lived happily ever after. Kind of. And this might seem like a big, fictional stretch, but reality is often stranger than fiction, and Darwin's frog has drawn quite a bit of inspiration from this story, seemingly. Or perhaps the other way around, as the males will do just that, swallow their kids. Specifically, after mating, the females will lay eggs, which are then placed under the care of the fathers, while the moms then dip out for some milk and cigarettes. For a while, nothing much happens. However, after a few weeks, usually 3, the male will start to notice the embryo is beginning to move. And apparently that makes these guys pretty hungry, because after observing this, they will then promptly gobble down these eggs. But they don't send the little ones straight down the pipe. Rather, they will stick them to their vocal sacs. Yeah. And here the eggs will remain for about 3 days, when they will then hatch, still lodged in the male's throat. And if giving birth in your neck isn't unsettling enough, then hold on to your horses, because the story does not end here. After the babies show up, the dad doesn't just release them, as that would be too easy obviously. Instead, they remain trapped in his neck, being forced to feed on not only their very own egg yolks, but then eventually upon the juices that come off of the Papa Frog's vocal sac, which gives even Bear Grylls a run for his money. It makes me a little bit nauseous. And this period of being stuck in the throat doesn't just last for a few days, or even weeks, but well over a month. And keep in mind, they continue to develop throughout this whole ordeal, going from tadpoles to full-on frogs. And it's only when they become grown, the dad finally decides that they've had enough, and following in Kronos' footsteps, he will proceed to yak up his children, who for 6 weeks have known nothing but darkness and slime. So in other words, this sounds pretty bad for the kids, but honestly, not too great for the parents either. But it's somehow still arguably less uncomfortable than what Kiwis have to go through. Well, the moms to be specific. These little flightless birds are cute, cuddly, and just oh so lovable, which has made them among New Zealand's most famous animals. And obviously a big portion of their celebrity status comes from their odd appearance, including the body shape, severe lack in wings, etc. But it's not just their outside that is a bit off, so to speak. The insides can get a bit funky too. And it starts a little bit of love, which Kiwis are pretty good at. As once bonded, a male and female will tend to live out the rest of their lives as a monogamous couple. And every season the two will try for kids, but strictly just one egg that is. And I think I have an idea why. You see, a female Kiwi is only about the size of a domesticated chicken, and yet each of its eggs can be over 450 grams or 16 ounces. And that might not sound that impressive off the rip, but to put that into perspective, that's literally about 1/4 of their entire body size, and 6 times the size of the egg you see a chicken lay. And another way to think about it is that this would be like if humans gave birth to a 5-year-old. And it definitely is ouch for the female Kiwis, with these giant eggs taking their toll. For starters, beginning 30 days before the due date, the female will have to start eating a lot more food to keep up with the rapidly growing egg, ingesting about 3 times the normal amount of food she normally eats. And then right before birth, she has to completely switch up and go from overeating to nada. In other words, fasting. As at this point, the egg is so large that there is literally no more space in her stomach for her to eat. So water it is. And then when it's time for the baby to come out, I don't think I need to explain why it sucks for the mom. Well, the only upside is that afterwards, she gets a 3-month vacation to herself while the father takes over, incubating the egg. Though I do have to say, if I was a Kiwi, I still think I know which deal I'm going for. But this all begs the question, which is, why on earth would Kiwis want to give birth to such giant eggs? Originally, we thought it had something to do with their ancestry, as there was a belief that Kiwis were heavily related to the now extinct giant moas, who subsequently had giant eggs. And so the idea was that perhaps large eggs was simply a trait the Kiwis never shook. But after some analysis and figuring out that Kiwis really come from a smaller flighted bird, the new idea is that this has something to do with precocity, a trend seen in multiple birds, which is essentially the trait of hatching birds that are more mature and mobile than the smaller, less developed ones. Truthfully though, I don't know if I feel like these benefits are still worth the pain of the birthing process. And yet, this experience is probably still like winning the lottery compared to what one fluffy friend has to go through, that friend being the spotted hyena. If you've seen my video on these lot, then you probably know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't, then you might want to, as this part is just scratching the surface of their insanity. But let me give you just a little taste of what these creatures go through. If you took a female and male spotted hyena and placed them side by side, you'd notice something a bit odd, and that's the lack of significant differences between the two. And if you think popping under the hood would clear things up, think again, for checking would only confuse you more, making you question if you accidentally yoinked 2 males, since the female's genitalia are actually a lot like that of the male's, as the clitoris is quite enlarged, resulting in a pseudopenis in all senses of the word, which is, by the way, the same size as the male's and capable of an erection. Meanwhile, the females also lack an external vaginal opening and do everything through their pseudopenis, just like a male, including urination, copulation, which probably sounds confusing, and yeah, you guessed it, giving birth. And it's as bad as it sounds. Each newborn spotted hyena is about 1.5 kilos, or 3 pounds at birth. So in other words, it's kind of like fitting a coconut through a keyhole. And to make this whole process needlessly more agonizing, the pseudopenis structure is fairly long, and also inflexible. So yeah, we're gonna need a whole lot of anesthesia for this one. And with these things in mind, it's no surprise that during birth, first-time mothers will experience ruptured genitalia. That hurts like hell, take weeks to heal, and is not even guaranteed to heal up, as it can be a life-threatening condition via blood loss, shock, or infection. And ultimately, spotted hyena births are one of the deadliest out there for moms, with up to 20% of first-time mothers dying during or due to the process. And for those that do survive, things don't remain the same. Probably mentally, but definitely physically, as the area scars up and the pseudopenis loses many of its original aspects, with perhaps the only upside being that this does end up making future births marginally easier. And looking at the other cases in this video, you may be thinking that this torturous way of having children must have some incredible benefits in turn for the newborns. But nope, it's just as bad for them, if not worse if we strictly focus on fatality rates. It turns out that a narrow, tight, stiff tube isn't exactly easy to get through, resulting in many fatalities. And in fact, up to 60% of hyena infants will die during their first year of life, with a very significant portion of that coming from the birthing process itself, which is definitely a giant smack in the face for the moms, because here we have one of, if not the most painful birthing process in the entire animal kingdom, and most of the time your offspring won't actually survive. I really can't even defend nature's choice in this method. And so after that one, I'm sure we all need a little break from this grimness. So instead, let's focus on some less painful births, which have instead earned points in the horror department for simply looking freaky. And one animal that achieves this is a creature that you might not have expected, given its harmless and cute appearance, the seahorse. These guys may look majestic and unlike anything else in the animal kingdom, but they are really just fish, albeit bony ones. Very, very bony ones, with an excess of bones actually being why they possess that rigid-like pose. And if you took a look at a skeleton of a seahorse, you'd find that it basically looks remarkably similar to an alive one, as opposed to some animals, wherein the skeleton is light years away from what you'd expect. This classic look makes seahorses and their close relatives one of a kind, but to be honest, its appearance is only one part of its uniqueness, as they are also trendsetters in the pregnancy department. Never thought I'd say that. For this highly modified pipefish, and a few other of its pipefish cousins, are the only known animals in the entire animal kingdom in which the males have full-on pregnancies and give birth. And this one-of-a-kind process starts with a very passionate dance. And to be more specific, a female and male will pair up and then carry out this courtship dance. Cause you gotta know the future parent of your kids knows how to move it. Or rather swim it, I suppose. And after a successful dance-off, the females will then give the males a sacred gift. Eggs. Lots and lots of eggs, which are unfertilized, and shove them straight into the male's stomach, or his pouch, actually. And there, over the following 10 to 45 days, depending on the species, the eggs will start to fertilize whilst being surrounded in spongy tissue which deliver ample amounts of oxygen, acting as a cozy incubator. And the dad will also put in some more work to provide for the eggs by making sure his diet is rich in calcium and lipids, which are apparently pretty good for little unborn seahorses. And during this whole process, male seahorses can balloon to almost comical sizes. I mean, check out this guy right here. He's literally about to blow, and that's because I'm not exaggerating when I say they get a lot of eggs, with some species receiving thousands each mating season. And then, like a balloon, or perhaps the chest burster from Alien, when the time comes, the males, pop. Well, not literally, but pretty much close to it, as the males will shotgun these bad boys out from his pouch in concentrated bursts, resulting in a pretty uncomfortable show to the human eye, at least my eye. And though it is not necessarily overtly painful for the males, the whole thing seems kind of off-putting, and is certainly exhausting, as this onslaught of shooting kids out of your stomach can go on for literal days, up to 3 in certain species, during which they are also very vulnerable to predation. So you gotta have some stamina and be ready for contractions if you want to be a seahorse. Well, a male one specifically. But this again begs the question of why do the males give birth? And the answer seems to have something to do with the abysmal survival rates of the baby seahorse, with only about 0.5% making it in the long run. Thus, to counter this little issue, seahorses have switched to male pregnancy in order to maximize the amount of babies born in the long term, with one study finding that if females were doing the birthing, then given certain restraints, there would be about 17% or so less seahorses being born every year. And we need all the seahorses we can get, as many of these guys are endangered. And let me tell you, male birthing and super skeletons didn't evolve for these guys just to disappear at the hands of humans. Now, giving birth by erupting like a volcano through your abdominal region probably checks a few people's phobia boxes. But that being said, there isn't really a specific phobia that this aligns with, probably. However, given just how messed up nature is, it should come as no surprise that there are in fact other animals out there that literally give birth in ways which are textbook examples of specific phobias. And the prime example of this is trypophobia, the fear of seeing repetitive patterns or clusters of small holes and bumps. So if this reminds you of your own fears a bit, I suggest maybe skipping this part, as I will be talking about the Suriname toad. Yet despite its name clearly stating that it is a toad, I think that maybe pancake would be a better classification, as this aquatic frog has historically been well known for its highly depressed, almost entirely flat body, along with a broad head and lack of tongue. And these adaptations help the Suriname toad stay hidden along the water's floor, and ambush unsuspecting prey via mean old suction, which swallows its snacks whole. And along with helping it get a full stomach, this wide surface area has other uses too, as essentially it serves as a crop field for plants. Except, in this case, the field is the skin, and the crops are, the babies. Like from something straight out of Elden Ring or Dark Souls, the egg of the Suriname toads won't go on an object, or in the stomachs, but rather on their backs. It begins with around 60 to 100 unfertilized eggs that the females willingly release. Then a lucky, or unlucky male toad, depending on how you look at it, will then be given the sacred opportunity to fertilize these eggs, and then push them down into the literal back of the female frog. Over the coming days, these eggs will sink deeper and deeper into her back, where skin will then grow around them and form cyst-like structures that are arranged in honeycombed pockets. Sounds absolutely delicious, right? And if this sounds bad, just wait, because remember, baby frogs and toads develop in stages, and at one stage are tadpoles. And normally at this point, they'd be out there swimming in the water, but in the Suriname toad, they are not released at this point. In other words, the moms will enjoy the oh-so-exquisite sensation of tens to hundreds of tadpoles wiggling around and swimming in her back. Yeah, imagine that. And if you are lucky enough or unlucky enough to peer into one's back, you might even be able to see them. But hold on to your horses, because we're not at the finish line just yet, because there is still the grand finale in this birthing process. It happens after the tadpoles have transformed into fully fledged toadlets. And wanting to get it going in life, they will all rush to the surface of their cocoons. And it's at this moment that things go from unsettling to pure nightmare fuel. Because like fireworks from hell, these hatchlings will erupt from their cluster of cysts like popcorns popping in a popcorn machine. Visually, this process is disturbing to say the least. And even when it finally ends, we are left with a rather unsettling mosaic that gives me flashbacks to Resident Evil 7, if you know what I'm talking about. And it's only some time after the birthing process that things return a bit to normal, with the females shedding the skin in which the baby toads were buried. Albeit, all this does is freshen the back up for round 2 in the next mating season. And while very different in many regards, it turns out that this highly bizarre way of giving birth has reasons similar to that of the Kiwis, with the goal here being to hatch and release the young in a more matured state, that in turn gives them a better chance of surviving, whereas if they came out as tadpoles, they would be at greater risk of predation. And I guess it has worked thus far, as the Suriname toad is one of the few animals out there these days which is classified as least concern when it comes to the risk of extinction. So pretty gnarly. Yet compared to some of the other births I mentioned, it's actually fairly tame for the young and mom when it comes to pain and risk. But I can't say the same thing when it comes to our final contender in this video, the sand tiger shark. When you look at this guy's face, you'd probably assume it's one tough creature. And though we shouldn't really be judging books off their covers, in this case, it's spot on. As even before reaching the world, these sharks undergo hardships that some won't face in their entire lives. And it all goes down in the wombs of their mother. Within each sand tiger shark female contains 2 separate uteri, wherein a dozen of embryos will vie for their right to live, which they do so through the extreme phenomena known as intrauterine cannibalization. And yes, it's just as bad as it sounds. During this lovely event, these pups yet born will attack, kill, and eat each other to see which one of them is truly the strongest, which kind of makes our sperm race look like a sportsmanship award. Now typically, it seems like the first embryo to be hatched from its fertilized egg will almost always win the game, due to the rather unfair head start that allows it to grow larger, and to reach that point first where it decides it wants to be an only child, or rather, the only child in its uteri. As within each one, this battle royale takes place, with the end result being just 2 pups left standing, and also ensuring that only the meanest of the lot represent the species. And the killing doesn't even end at this point, for after their victory, the pups will celebrate, so you could say, by then eating a bunch of non-fertilized eggs in the womb, resulting in a pretty impressive KD off the bat. And this method is unusually cruel, even amongst the not-so-snuggly sharks. But the funny thing about all of this is that despite cannibalizing their siblings in order to live, sand tiger sharks are actually pretty darn docile and peaceful when actually born. Almost like this experience as pups leaves each winner with some serious PTSD that has them retiring from violence from the beginning. Which makes sense, cause I know I would. So there you have it, enough miracles of childbirth to give you nightmares for the rest of the year. And honestly, researching this video was enough to make me lose my appetite quite a few times over. So if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and until next time.